Hello, Shabbat Shalom. This is Rabbi Dan Ain, and this is Congregation Beth Shalom's Take-Home Torah for Friday, June 11th. The Torah portion is Parshat Korach, and I wanted to begin just with a couple of observations that I have noticed. I am getting close to concluding my third year here at Congregation Beth Shalom and in San Francisco, and one of the things that I noticed is that the word argument can seem at times like a four-letter word in this town. And I've noticed that there are times in which perhaps my excitement for the nature of a good argument perhaps is misunderstood as some way being aggressive or antagonistic. But for me, and quite often for Talmudic discourse and for a lot of Jews, basically a good argument is the spice of life. Certainly you've heard the expression, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And how boring would it be if we all looked alike, if we dressed alike, and we sounded the same? In fact, recently I asked an engaged couple that was coming to meet with me. I said to them, what do you argue about? And they looked at me very quickly and said, no, we don't fight. We don't fight. We don't ever fight. But I didn't mean fight. I meant disagreement. And a fight and a disagreement isn't necessarily the same thing. And we learn this in our Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot. It says, every controversy which is l'shem shamayim, which is for the sake of heaven, in the end it will endure. But any controversy which is not motivated for the sake of heaven, in the end will not endure. So the Mishnah asks, what is a controversy for the sake of heaven? And it answers the disputes between the 2 great schools, Hillel and Shammai. And which is a controversy that is not l'shem shamayim, that is not for the sake of heaven. The Mishnah says the dispute of Korach and his group, that's this week's Torah portion, against Moses and Aaron. And so in this week's Torah portion, Korach and a group of other well-known Israelites, they stand against Moses. They say, why does he get to be in charge? We want to be in charge too. Moses falls on his face, sort of like a high noon scene. He says, you come and bring your fire pans to bring the offerings. Aaron will bring his offerings. We'll have a duel of some sort, and whichever offering is accepted by the Lord will be the one who is in charge of the community. The next day comes, the offerings are brought, and an earthquake opens up underneath Korach and his group of rebels and swallows them up completely, making no doubt as to who is in charge here. So what is the lesson? What is the lesson that we gather from this? Well, it's interesting because story doesn't stop there. After the earth has swallowed up these rebels, Eliezer, who is Aaron's son, is told to run off to grab the fire pans from the rebels, to hammer them out, and to put them on the altar itself. Why? Because they're holy. But why? What makes them holy? Weren't they used in an inappropriate offering that led to them and their families being swallowed by the earth? Why would you take a fire pan that was used for such an offering and affix it to the altar? And there are a lot of different ideas about this, but the one that sticks with me, it's the 13th anniversary of my wedding. This was my wedding Torah portion, and my rabbi, Neil Gilman of blessed memory, who officiated at that ceremony, he would explain that the reason that we take the fire pans from the Korachites, from the rebels, and affix it to our altar is to remind us that this idea of questioning, of challenging authorities, of bringing arguments, is a part of who we are. And that we need to have that in our altar and as a part of our community. We can't bury it, if you will. We have to give voice to diversity, to people who disagree with us, to people who challenge the way we're doing things. That is an essential lesson from both the Mishnah and from this Torah portion. And the Mishnah asks, why is it necessary to mention, when dealing with Shammai or Hillel, when this particular view is declared non-acceptable and the halacha remains with its disputant? In other words, the Mishnah is saying, why? Okay, we have this dispute that goes on between the school of Hillel, the school of Shammai. Why does the Mishnah report both the ones that we go with and the ones that don't go with? Of course, one of the most famous disputes you're probably familiar with is the one on how do we light the Hanukkah candles. Shammai says you start with 8 candles, you work your way down to 1. Hillel says start 1, work your way up to 8. And of course, we know we go with Hillel, but we still include the Shammai lesson. So why? Mishnah says, would it not have been wiser simply to codify the law according to the proper view? Why bother mentioning the minority opinion? Mishnah says it comes to teach all future generation that a person should never be persistent in their views. You shouldn't be too persistent in the views, for the fathers of the world were not persistent in their views. All right, so Rabbi Norman Lamb of blessed memory tries to explain this Mishnah for us. He says what the Mishnah means is that Hillel and Shammai were the fathers of the oral Torah. They were the chief channels for the transmission of the Jewish tradition. They were people who were constantly engaged in disputes and debates and polemics. They always were arguing, but they always maintained mutual respect between them. They were valiant and ferocious advocates, Lamb says, of differing opinions, but they were always intellectually honest. And when one saw that his opinion was weak and that of his opponent was more substantial, he did not hesitate to admit the truth and to yield. Lamb concludes, Hillel and Shammai teach us that we must be vigorous in the pursuit of our ideas, but never stubborn, resolute, but never relentless, incorruptible, but never immovable. And I think as we look at this week's Torah portion and we learn the lesson of Korach, who challenges Moses' authority, and of course, taking those fire pans and putting them on our altar, we are reminded that we validate, support, encourage multiple opinions, even if those opinions disagree with our opinions, disagree with my opinions. We want to hear them. We want to engage with them in a polite, respectable fashion, l'shem shamayim. And I think the key lesson is that none of us should be like Korach, totally stubborn, insistent of our position. And none of us should be afraid of the discussion either. And that, as I sum up here, really sticks with me, especially as I'm entering into the next 5 years here. I'm taking a little vacation and then entering into the next 5 years and the next century of our community. I think it's very important that we come together and we learn how to appreciate the diversity of our community and how we can share those opinions and disagree with each other. Things might happen at the shul that isn't exactly the way we would have hoped it went down, but this was a part of a process and a discussion, l'shem shamayim, and we are a part of this community. So I think it's important as we move forward into this next century to realize that we are one community full of diverse opinions that make us colorful and vibrant, and that we are okay disagreeing with each other. We can do that. We can stay in community, and we can move forward in the worship of God. So that is my prayer for all of you on this Shabbat. And I wish all of you a wonderful, peaceful, and God willing, healthy Shabbat as we enter into this new season. I was thinking I've entered into my time of vacation, which I'm looking forward to, and returning with all of you in the summertime. So take care. Shabbat Shalom.